Hello, I'm Dr. Tushar Chirsagar. I'm a hair transplant surgeon and I'm going to be debunking some of the hair transplant myths which are there. Now, hair transplant myths are very common because hair transplant surgery has become very common in current time. So myth number one is that hair transplant is a painful procedure. Now many people tend to believe that hair transplant is very painful because at times what has happened is patients have seen the hair transplant surgery online, and because of the way it looks, it is assumed that it is very painful. However, this is not true. Most hair transplant surgeries are performed under local anesthesia, which means that you will be completely awake but you will not feel any pain during the procedure. Now, after the procedure, a lot of people assume that once the anesthesia wears off, you are going to be in a hell of a time because of the anesthesia has disappeared now. But we do start painkillers which manage your discomfort very nicely, and most people who have done hair transplant do not complain of excessive pain during the procedure. Now, myth number two is that hair transplant is an expensive procedure and it is only meant for celebrities. This is absolutely not the case anymore. It was once, but that was like 20 years ago. Nowadays, hair transplant is very commonplace. It is very affordable as well. And a lot of hair transplant centers offer financing options like EMIs on credit cards or EMIs otherwise, which makes the hair transplant surgery a very affordable option to the people. Also, the cost of hair transplant really depends on the number of grafts needed. So a person needing a small number of grafts is not going to have a very expensive hair transplant surgery. So you should not be worried about that. Of course, consult the hair transplant surgeon for the cost and be clear about it. Myth number three is that hair transplant results are immediate. This myth has come about because many people tend to see the pre and post photographs of the patients online, and they assume that results are pretty much immediate. However, this is not the case. After hair transplant, the transplanted hair fall out within weeks, and it takes about several months, up to 7 or 8 months, to new hair to grow back and to give you the final result. In some cases, it can take up to a year to get a final result of the procedure. Now, myth number four is that hair transplant is only meant for men. And a hair transplant is not only meant for men, it can be done in women. The reasons for doing are also very similar. Basically, hair transplant is done wherever there is hair thinning and gaps in the hair. So men as well as women both have it. So both can be, both are eligible for doing a hair transplant. Now, there are some women who are experiencing hair loss and thinning, especially in the hairline section, and the procedure is tailored for that, and we correct hairline in women with a very fantastic result. Myth number five is hair transplant is a one-time procedure. Now, this is because of some online influence. See, hair transplant is done in people who are having ongoing hair loss. That means the area which we are covering now will be fine. That will not need another procedure, but the area which we are not covering, which has currently hair, may lose hair in future, and that portion may need another surgery in the future. So you should not assume that hair transplant is only a single and a final procedure and that's about it. You should always assume that maybe 1 or 2 procedures are needed. Myth number 6 is hair transplant leads to brain issues or sometimes even brain cancers. Now, this is by far one of the wackiest of the myths that I've heard from the patients so far. Mostly it is a rumor spread by people, mostly on WhatsApp University, and this is ridiculous and just don't pay any attention to it. In conclusion, there are so many common myths about hair transplant which are so utterly wrong, and what they do is that they cause patients to have unnecessary concern regarding hair transplant, and they are devoid of getting a hair transplant. So hair transplant is not actually very painful. It is done in men as well as women, and the results of the procedure are not immediate, but they are sure and they are very rewarding. And if you're considering choosing hair transplant as a surgery, be sure to consult a qualified hair transplant surgeon and make your decision accordingly.